Okay, here we are with a new character, Samson. And Delilah. And also some other characters you might not remember what we're doing in here. We're trying to bring angles to stories that we may know the root story really well, but we're trying to bring different facets of information that either, like, I was actually talking with my dad yesterday about this, and I won't spoil it for you. There's something coming in the lesson that might surprise you too, and it surprised him. And he was like, "What? I never noticed that." So I turned to Judges 16 and I read it to him. And he was like, "What translation is that?" And it doesn't matter what translation it is, Dad. That's what it says. And so we've oftentimes had different Bible stories from VBS and from our childhood and other places that we remember a particular way. And then as adults, when we come back and study them, we find out a bunch of other stuff that we had failed to retain about that story, and maybe even some of the core story itself that the text just says something different than what we remember. So all of that, I think, will come to light this morning, don't you?
Right, yeah. Carol asked me, you're going to include Delilah. We didn't have Delilah, it would be like having salt without pepper, you've got to have Delilah in the story. So, here's...
Bad pepper, yeah.
We had several different choices when we look at these things, and we like the black and white, so it was good. All right.
It looks very Roman-esque.
In fact, I noticed that that Les had a couple of slides today that we had, a couple of slides in there that we had Jonah.
Yeah.
In our lesson last week, I think.
Last week.
The word judge, let's talk about the word judge for just a minute. In Hebrew, there are two basic words for judge. One, you recognize the name Dan. Dan is the verb is from that. So Dan, God, when you have somebody named Dan, he has judged, or Daniel, God has judged. So that's one of the words. This is not the word. There's a second word that can be also translated governor, ruler, deliverer, and this is the word used in the book of Judges for these people. So again, I think people wonder why is Samuel, called in some versions a ruler. A deliverer would be a really good translation. So.
And what we did here is we talked about in our Jonah story, we talked about Tarsus and Tarshish being the two different S's in Hebrew. And the S's, the first letter from your right up there that looks like a W with dots above it, that's the sh sound. And so Samson's name in Hebrew is actually Shimshon. Shimshon. Which if you said Shimshon, I'm not sure I would get to Samson in English. But there's just a little interesting fact for you on how it would be pronounced. So Samson is distinct from other cycles of judges. Like we talked about Jonah having a particularity of what a prophet qualification would be, here's a particularity about what a judge's qualification would be. Instead of the 6 things that are normally present in a judge, Samson really only has 2 of them. He does tell Israel that they're doing evil in the sight of the Lord, and he gives them into the hands of an oppressor. And judges do that, but they do 4 other things that Samson doesn't do. Also, interestingly, like Jonah last week, the story of Samson is a lot more biographical. It's a lot more about his birth, his life, and his death than it is about Israel, which is also distinct from other judge accounts.
You might say one other thing. The book of Judges is not, a lot of the judges are not over all of Israel. They're just over a section of Israel. And here's the section on the western side of the land, west of Israel, where the Philistines lived. And Samson's in an area right next to that area. He's just west of where David killed Goliath.
Yeah, and to your comments a while ago about Dan, the tribe of Dan is where Samson's mother is. And the angel of the Lord appears to a woman in the tribe of Dan and tells her that she will have a son who will be a Nazarite and deliver his people from the hated Philistines. And that Nazarite carries the vows with it of things like don't cut the hair, don't consume alcohol, don't let a razor touch the face, right?
Okay, correct. Yeah, I thought that since Philistines were mentioned there, there would be a good place to show you something about the Philistines. This is a drawing imitating the archaeological finds, and the next slide will show you one of those finds down in Egypt under the rule of Ramses III. There was a invasion by the Philistines into Egypt. And so we do have pictures of them on the walls of their temples. So that's why we did that.
And that's what they look like.
Yeah, and so they had a helmet that looked like it has feathers in it. There's debate about exactly what it is, but this is what a kind of Philistine really did look like.
So later, the angel of the Lord also appears to both the woman and her husband. So this would be Manoah, and Manoah is Samson's father, not the name of his mom. As a matter of fact, we never get the name of Samson's mother. But the angel appears to them, and in that appearance, the husband is finding out that what his wife had told him that had happened when he was not present was actually true. And he's starting to put some of the pieces together. And so Manoah, Samson's father, says to the angel of the Lord, "What is your name?" So that when your words come true, in other words, when we have this son and he is a Nazarite, we may honor you. And the angel of the Lord said to him, "Why do you ask my name? It is too wonderful." And so he doesn't tell him his name. But that's when Manoah realizes that this person is an angel, and this person is representing Yahweh. And when the flames rose up from the altar toward the sky, the angel ascended in the flame and went away from him. And then, this is interesting to me, almost comical now, looking back on it. Manoah says that he's afraid that they will surely die because they have seen the Lord. Once he figures out that angel was representing God and what he was saying was going to come true, and the reason he didn't get the name is he's the representative of the Lord, or Yahweh, he decided that, well, everybody knows if you see God, you won't survive. And then it's Samson's mom who says, "You really think that if he came and told us all this stuff about the son we're going to have and the future, that then he would kill us?" And so she kind of brings some logic into the situation and says, "I don't think we have anything to fear." She doesn't try to explain theologically how they've seen God and survived, but instead just takes the angel's words as what the angel says and proceeds on.
Yeah, we have to listen to our wives a lot of times. They have some good things to say.
That's right.
No plug for women.
So at the proper time, the woman gives birth to a son whom God's Spirit began to stir, and he was given the name Samson. So here's you some maps.
Yeah, we threw a few maps in here. Again, if you've been to Israel with us, as some of you have, you remember, you see where Beth Shemesh is down there. The Valley of Elah is just to the east of that, so you're really close by. In fact, we usually stop at Beth Shemesh and take a look at the dig there that goes on. But this is going to show you some key places, and the story starts out between Eshtaol and Zorah there. And somewhere in there, there's a little village or whatever where Samson was born.
And I'm not sure which translation you were using. I'm pretty sure it's the Rodney Cloud translation that says, when grown, Samson falls in love with a Philistine lass from the village of Timnah.
Right.
So, if you're not, and so this is before Delilah, but it's another Philistine lass. So here comes maybe something that when we think of the story of Samson, we think of Samson and Delilah and how that relationship went, but there's one before Delilah that's also Philistine.
Yeah, and again, we just wanted to show you a little bit about the area. So here's a map showing you where the Philistines, basically functioned. And so he's these two areas overlap. Sometimes the Philistines conquered a part of it. Sometimes Israel took it back over.
Yeah, and on this map, you can see, if I can make this work, you can see Timnah right here, and Ekron here, and Zorah where we started here. And so you can kind of see that the story starts in between, well, actually in between here, Eshtaol and Zorah. This is where he's born, but then he comes over to Timnah, or Timnah is where the lass is from that he meets.
Yeah, he's got a thing for these Philistine women.
Even though his parents tell him, don't.
Right. So this is an excellent map that Stan had showing you that. We put Lehi on there because that's going to come to play an important role here. But anyway, so he goes over to Timnah, and you see Ashkelon over there. We'll bring that into play later on. He does have contact with a couple of Philistine cities.
Yep, here's one more.
Right.
Just going back, Timnah back to Zorah, and then back to Lehi. So he basically makes this out and back type trajectory for the story there in Judges. And on that out and back, he meets a lion.
He's traveling back and forth because he's courting this lady and decided to marry her, and he demands his father make the arrangements. And so he's on his way back and forth, and lo and behold, a lion, he's attacked by a lion. And in ancient Canaan, there were lions. It was a different territory. The lions basically disappeared eventually. There was a jungle along the Jordan River, but anyway, he's on his way, runs next to this vineyard, a lion attacks him.
And he kills it because it says there at the end, having been empowered by the Spirit of God.
Right.
So not just that he happened to get lucky. He has God with him, and he kills the lion. And then several days later, when he passed the vineyards of Timnah, so like Dr. Cloud said, he's going back and forth. So he kills this lion. I guess he just leaves it there and goes on. And then when he comes back, there's the carcass of the lion, and he's surprised to find a swarm of bees all around the lion. And then he looks inside the lion and finds honey.
Right. So we found a couple of interesting slides.
Like maybe lion honey is something we should start marketing at Publix and Kroger. Don't know that we've actually ever seen the lion honey before, but this is a strange part of the story, right? Maybe you're thinking, I'm not sure, I got to check my Bible if this is even in there. It is, it's in there. Then we realized that he went, lion, honey, I think I'll take some home to mom and dad. Because the text tells us he takes honey from the carcass of the lion and goes home and serves it to his mom and dad and does not tell them that it came from a dead lion that he killed while traveling.
Correct.
Now if that's not a strange story, I don't know what.
But it's going to play a role because when they get ready for the wedding, there's a feast, and Samson, they invite 30 Philistines, apparently key people, well-to-do people, apparently, to the feast. And
Samson gives a riddle.
Right.
And the only person who knows the riddle is his betrothed, the Philistine woman from Timnah. And the men that are there are trying to figure out what the riddle is. And the reason we have this up above them is you can see they're kind of angry in this little cartoon. There's no way in the world they're going to figure out that honey came from a dead lion. I mean, that's up there for us, but they're not. They don't think that. Samson's riddle is out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet, and they don't know what in the world it means.
Yeah.
So they decide to ask his fiance.
Right. Ask and put pressure on her and threaten to burn her and her father and their whole household.
Yeah, it's more than just a little bit of a twisting of the arm. So the 30 Philistine guests cannot solve the riddle, and so they get the riddle. So now you should be hearing echoes from Samson's to-be, I guess, wife at this point, knows a piece of information and then tells it to the people who then want to do harm to Samson. So as Dr. Cloud says, she turns on the waterworks. I may have pulled that out. I changed it to turn on tears, just to be a little bit more politically correct. But yes, turns on the tears and says something to the effect of, probably if you loved me, you'd tell me your riddle.
Right.
And then she goes right and tells the riddle to the Philistine men who were pressuring her and her family. And so they come out and say, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And he gets very upset that they know his riddle, right?
Right. So he goes down to one of the Philistine cities we showed you, ends up killing 30 Philistines and taking their cloaks and everything. This is what the deal was all about, some fancy clothes, and brings those back.
But there's a strange statement here. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle.
Right. I always thought that was a very interesting statement. When I hear the story of Samson, I think of that. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have found out.
So we found this coffee mug, living life somewhere between Jesus take the wheel and I wish a heifer would.
Stan found that one.
Okay, so I might have found that one. I'm not exactly sure how to wrap that one up. I mean, I'm not sure if he's saying a derogatory comment towards his future wife, or if he's just saying that when one plows with one's cow, they learn things about them that they wouldn't know if they hadn't plowed.
Probably.
Still a strange statement.
It's an unusual statement, but anyway, very interesting statement.
Yeah, very interesting. We'll just leave it at very interesting. So Samson, empowered by the Holy Spirit of God, again, goes to Ashkelon and kills 30 Philistines and gives their rich clothing to the men of Timnah to pay off the bet. So because they come up and say, oh, we know it, it's honey and it's a lion, whatever the wager was, which the text wasn't overtly clear on how they set that up.
Just talking about some rich clothing.
Yeah, but what I mean is I don't remember in the story what the penalty would have been had them not know it. I know what they get. What would Samson have gotten if they were never able to understand the riddle?
Well, he would have gotten that. They were going to bring that to. He would have gotten 30 changes.
So that's all. It's over. It has nothing to do with his wife. So the clothing goes to the men of Timnah to pay off the debt that they had, or the bet. But unfortunately, it cost the lives of the people who were wearing those clothes.
Right.
So that's how that got paid. And he returned to his father's house until his temper cooled, but his bride, meantime, was given to another man.
Yeah, this is, of course, Samson doesn't know this. He's gone back home, and he's been stewing about this and takes action, and then he decides to go back and see a woman he takes to be his wife, because they went through the ceremony and all that.
And she's now someone else's. So later, Samson, upon finding his bride had been given to another man, caught 300 foxes. Did you know this one was in there? He catches 300 foxes, ties their tails together in pairs. So you have 2 by 2 foxes tied together, and then sets their tails on fire, and then releases each pair in the grain fields, and it destroys the vineyards and the olive groves. So I guess this is the equivalent of an accelerant, like with gasoline, when somebody puts something on the grass and lights it. This time you light animals on fire, which is unfortunate, and then you turn them loose, and they spread the fire all over the place because their tails are on fire.
And you'll never believe it, but we found a picture of this.
We did. Here it is. Poor foxes. That's maybe they just got singed and their tails grew back. I don't know, but still. So he goes on this tear of killing large number of Philistines. When they mobilize and bring a very large army against Samson's kin, his own people beg him to go out and actually defend them and stand up for them. So he allows himself to be tied up at a place called Lehi, which you helped me with that pronunciation, which means jawbone. So this may bring back some memory of more Samson's story that you know, where he's being handed over to the enemy, but breaks free when he sees the hated enemy. So in other words, when they tie him up, the tying doesn't really work. And so as soon as they show up in their own sight, he just easily breaks free. Because he's got super, like almost like He-Man. I think of He-Man every time I think of Samson, the cartoon I grew up with. He's just more powerful than the average person.
Right. And then God gives him the special situations, special strength.
And so he sees a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and he chooses that as his weapon. And he slaughters the whole body of the Philistines who had come for him. Now, we had a discussion up on the stage this morning while the countdown was running. I put the 1,000 in there because a lot of your English translations say 1,000. Dr. Cloud, you said that maybe it represents the battalion or the company or the unit, and so it wouldn't necessarily be a human count as much as it would be a measure for an entire army group.
Right, yeah. There is been a debate for a long time about the Hebrew. There's 3 letters in each Hebrew root. And the same word that means 1,000, the same root that means 1,000, also is the root for a clan or a battalion. And again, to reduce the numbers, and you don't really have to reduce, but to reduce the numbers of people coming out of Exodus, the Greek came along, and what the Greek did was to translate it 1,000 in almost all those cases. But now some of the versions are saying this is really a clan or battalion. So he killed a lot of people, but it might not have been 1,000 as some of the versions say, but it was a large number of people. It doesn't change the magnitude of what he accomplished.
So, one of our cartoons we found from the back pew again, Jeff Larson. So tell me again, do we have a plan B? So Samson settles this little neighborhood dispute with a little fancy jawing. Sometimes it's harder to find funny ones depending on what story we're doing.
Right.
But he names the place of victory Ramoth Lehi, the Jawbone Hill.
Right, Jawbone Hill. That's, again, Lehi is connected with what happened there. And so this map had Timnah on there too, again, showing you the proximity of all these places.
And they're very close. He stays pretty much in the same geographic area. Now, Dr. Cloud says this cartoon is more accurate, picturing the defeated Philistines in armor depicted in archaeological discoveries. So whether it's 1,000 individual humans or not, it's still people who are trained militarily,
right,
with armor, with swords, with spears, and he has a jawbone of a donkey and the Holy Spirit.
Right. Yeah, everybody wasn't a soldier in the ancient world, and so the Philistines now, this time, send an armed group to get him after he'd been on this tear of killing different Philistines. So anyway, I thought it was a good picture, and again, that you could look at the helmets and show that somebody's trying to imitate the archaeology.
So, you want to take this one?
Okay, I didn't use the word prostitute or
Except you just did.
Different kind of words we could have used, but so I put it a woman of ill repute in Gaza. So again, he's gone to a Philistine city. He still has this thing for Philistine women, apparently, and goes to visit this prostitute. And when the people find out that Samson's there, then they wait at the gate, outside the gate for him, intending to kill him when he comes out the next morning.
And again, his super strength, he just yanks the whole gate off and decides to carry it with him.
Right, and I like this picture, Barry. There were 2 or 3 choices, but this picture actually showed what happens is he goes across land, and then there's a ridge. He had to climb up to Hebron, and so this shows him climbing. So I thought it depicted the picture very, very well.
Again, just this strength that he had is superhuman. You put this one in.
Yeah, I thought was good, but if you look on the left-hand side, again, he falls in love with another Philistine woman. This is the second one he wanted to marry, and this is Delilah. And Delilah is not so much in love with Samson as she is with the money that's offered. And so you can, why don't you read that for us?
For 5,500 pieces of silver, Delilah is willing to pretend she loves Samson. She says, "You're so strong, Samson. Is there anything that can't hold you?" And he said, "If I were tied up with 7 new leather straps, I'd be no stronger than any other man." And so this begins the deceitful. Actually, some of the English texts say that Delilah says to him that he has lied to her, which he has, but he never says that there's not a way for his strength to go away. He just never tells her the right way the first several times. One other interesting thing you made me think of when you said this is that this is the second Philistine woman that he's decided he wants to marry. The text tells us that with the first one, his parents said, "Don't, it's not a good idea." This time he didn't inquire, or they didn't bother telling him. They thought he had learned his lesson from the first one, but apparently he didn't, because he went forward. So this is one of the first things that he tells Delilah. And then, of course, Delilah keeps setting up this same situation where Samson's gone to sleep, and she wakes him up in a rush and says, "The Philistines are upon us," and to try to see if he can, not get out of whatever it is that she's done. And each time she does this, of course, he just breaks through the stuff and doesn't have any real struggle at all. And so again and again, Delilah fails, we said, with this. And you can just go through the text. There's straps. There's a material to make bows that hasn't been dried. That's one of them. There's
These are all, go ahead. They're all strong materials.
Yeah.
All very, very strong materials.
right, with a particular. He's very particular about the details of what they are. So then she gets upset and says, finally persists and tells him, "Tell me the secret of your strength." And I guess it would be one thing if that's all somebody did. They just got mad and just said, "Hey, I really want to know." But instead, she plays kind of the card of, "If you loved me," some of your English translations will say this, "If you say you love me, and if you loved me, how in the world can you not tell me your secret?" And so he ends up telling her. And this went on for several days before he concedes and tells her. So you want to go through one of the textual things?
Yeah,
most
I
people
love this picture, but it's not accurate. It pictures Delilah cutting off his hair, but that's not what the text says. And so anyway.
This is what the text says.
This is what the text says.
The text says, "She made him go to sleep on her lap and then called a man in to shave off the 7 braids of his hair."
And so we have a couple of different shots of this. This again, these would be Philistine nobles, but the next picture shows warriors involved. Oh yeah, here's what was actually said in Judges 16:20.
Yeah, he awoke from his sleep and said, "I will go out as other times and shake myself free," but he did not know that the Lord had left him. So this may be where you find people get in debates on, was it the length of his hair or was it God? Well, clearly it's God, but God commanded him not to cut his hair. So it was obeying God by not cutting his hair, but the hair itself was not the source of his strength. It was God who was the source of his strength. But then when he cut it, he disobeyed, and the Lord leaves him. And so when the Lord leaves him, now he's not strong. If by chance that text had said the Lord left him and his hair was still long, he still wouldn't be strong. But he disobeyed.
Yeah, one of the drawings has nobles around her, and this drawing has soldiers around her. And there's the guy in the background who cut off the locks of hair. And so here are the Philistine soldiers. And again, you see those helmets on top of their head that we see in the archaeological pictures.
And she's holding 2 or 3 braids of hair, and there's 2 on the bed, and there's 1 on the floor. So there's the 7 braids that the text says that he had. So some of your pictures where he's got the flowing locks might not actually be what they were. They were 7 braids, apparently. And so because of this, he has his eyes gouged out, and he is put to work like a donkey, which is interesting. Donkeys used to tread out the grain.
Right.
And he goes down to I guess the stone mill is what you would call it, on what he's pressing on there on that long beam, and he just walks around in circles all day and treads out the grain, the wheat.
Right.
But his hair begins to grow back.
Right. And he's had a lot of time to think about this and to understand that he has disobeyed God, and now he's paying the price of doing that.
And we got some great shots of different drawing suggestions of what this might have looked like when he gets positioned in the palace. So in Judges 16:23 through 30, he gets brought into Gaza to celebrate a feast for their god Dagon, and they made the mistake of placing him between the temple's two main pillars. And so we found some suggestions on this. This fella has just done a archaeological structure analysis, and he says, I've just had a look around your building and found some pretty serious structural flaws, showing Samson in the back between the two columns. Another one said, this looks like a good spot, but you see the poster there warning no Nazarites, no Samson, danger, not this pillar. And then it says the Philistines were not known for their ability to read. Not sure if that part's true, that they couldn't read, but it is odd that they decided to place him in such a place that would be the pivot point for the whole structure.
Right, and he knew something about the temple because he asked the Nahar that was carrying him to put him between two of the pillars, and the young man had no idea that's what Samson was up to, or he didn't dream that anything could happen.
And Samson, we have to remind ourselves, can't see.
That's right.
So he's going on the word of the individual who placed him there, and then he's just feeling for where the columns are.
Yeah, apparently Samson knew the area very, very well and probably had been in and looked at those places.
And so when Samson calls on God, he answers by restoring his great strength, and he pushes the columns down. And now we get back to our numbers here in a second of, it's going to be more than 1,000. He kills more Philistines on this day than he had in all the years he had been at war with them. So whatever that other battalion, unit, however many that was, plus the 30 for the bet with the lion, plus whatever is not explicitly documented, this event apparently wiped out more Philistines than any of the others combined.
Right. Yeah.
And so there must have been a lot of people present for this feast.
So the family goes and recovers the body. And notice it says, the reason we showed you all these maps, trying to show you where all the things that were taking place at the different Philistine cities and the different Israelite cities. This is on the border between the two countries. And so anyway, this is a picture of the family taking him to bury him. And you have a tomb in the background with a stone. As you know, that was a common practice in the ancient world to have these stones, and so that would be something like Jesus' tomb.
But it's back to between Zorah and Eschatal,
right,
which is where the story started.
Right. So we're back. Yeah, we're back to the very beginning of the story.
His birthplace.
Yeah, he was born between these two places, and so the burial ground is in one of those villages right there between these. Go ahead.
So we decided that with that, and hopefully we brought some things out that maybe you hadn't thought of in a while, or maybe some of you hadn't really noticed, or you're rifling through Judges right now trying to see if what we've been saying is even remotely accurate. We wanted to look at how Samson is applied to the New Testament. And it turns out Samson's only mentioned in the New Testament in one place. Outside of Judges 13 through 16, which we've basically covered this morning, those 4 chapters, Samson is mentioned only once in the Bible. In Hebrews 11:32, he's included in a list of great men and women of faith, which is how we decided to start this. As we sat down and thought of that listing of great people of faith, and we thought, well, why don't we do that? And that's what led to the graphics, the heroes of faith, and everything that we've been doing here in the auditorium is trying to bring some of these different characters out of Scripture that a place like Hebrews lists them. and has a list, and there's more, but has a list there in Hebrews of these people. And the list includes people like other judges, like David, and you've mentioned Samuel this morning, and the prophets. But Samson is listed there. And it is followed by a register of the acts of faith carried out by these individuals, Hebrews 11:33. And 3 of these acts correspond to Samson's actions. So in other words, what is described as a hero of faith and what their actions would be, 3 of those line up with what Samson did. One is that he prevented the mouths of lions from harming. So by killing the lion, it is an example, just like David wrestled the bear and
Daniel
in the lion's den. So you see the connectivity there. Samson and others were strengthened from weakness. So he has got this unbelievable strength because of the Holy Spirit. And actually, you want to say anything on what his weakness would be other than his hair being short? I mean, would it be his family of origin? Would it be that part of the world, or do we know?
No, I wouldn't know.
All right. Well, so we're not quite sure on what his weakness would have been had God not given him superhuman strength through the blessing of the Holy Spirit. But it still lines up. And then 3 became strong in war. And again, that's Hebrews 11:33 through 34. And clearly Samson becomes strong in war. And when he prays to have his strength restored to him, he has the ultimate, warlike action that he takes place by leveling the temple.
Right.
And the Philistines, there's another interesting thing. Early in the passages about Samson and Judges, when he first sees the Philistine woman that he wants to marry and his parents say no, the text tells us that the Lord allowed it to use that situation in order to weaken the Philistines. So it was already God having a plan for the Philistines that then he worked through Samson for that plan, even the things that Samson's parents had told him not to do. So that might be the weakness, is don't fall for Philistine women. But then he does, and then God works through that to actually carry out his plans for the Philistines.
Right. Makes sense.
So what can we learn from comparing Samson to other characters? You want to do it or you want me to do it?
Go ahead.
So this one gets a little sticky. We didn't go into great detail here, but there are many attempts to define Samson by comparing him to other ancient history characters. So if you go and you look in what's called the ancient Near East literature, you can find almost like parallel stories or synonymous stories with characters of different names. Various attempts to compare Samson to literary characters in mythology and folklore can be found. And he has been likened to characters such as Enkidu, Gilgamesh, and Hercules. And Hercules there is spelled a little bit differently than it might be for the cartoon version. But these are people that other civilizations and other places in the ancient Near East told a similar story of a human being that had more than human power and could do things. And the Bible comes along and clarifies that on how that actually happened. It is true, but it's true of Samson, and it's true because of the Holy Spirit and God enabling him to do that. Many have also characterized Samson as a wild man, a trickster, a hero, or a combination of the 3. And what we concluded is, regardless of the characterization, the biblical Samson is a figure who does not fit neatly into a specific descriptive category. I mean, you can't really, I don't think you can really call him a good Goliath, because he's not from Gath and he's not that type of lineage. You can't call him one of David's mighty men that we're going to talk about next week. So you're relegated to this category for Samson that has population 1, Samson. And I think that's what we're kind of saying, is that it's just a category of his own. And there's a lot of questions that we can't answer, and I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. For those who were closer to the story, they probably knew a lot of this information that is lost on us because we're so far removed from it. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, the thing about Samson that we have to remember is that when he again put God first, when he again said, he said to God, I know you can do this, and I ask you to do this because of my eyes and all. He was again demonstrating faith. Every once in a while, he demonstrated faith. He had a lot of flaws, there's no doubt about it. He's not bragged on as being a good guy, and you don't have a lot of people naming their children Samson, believe it or not. And but he gets listed in the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11 because he called on God when finally he realized that he did the wrong thing, and then he turned to God, and God ended his life with this act of faith.
Yeah, so just to clarify what I was saying, David, for example, man after God's own heart, definitely doesn't have anything from the text that says he has superhuman abilities, right? He doesn't have massively unbelievable human strength. He doesn't knock down buildings by standing between two pillars. Since we don't know God's ways and his ways are higher than ours, I guess we'll have to find out why he wanted Samson to do that and not someone like David. That's all I meant, was that that's why he's so hard to pinpoint into a category. It's clearly the text and the story shows us that he has abilities that God has given him for a reason against the Philistines. And some of those reasons we're so far removed from, we might not notice. So we'll just wait and find out.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead and finish that, and I'll say a word about
that's
next
for you.
week.
He was
He
was the best actor in the Bible because he brought the house down.
Right. Is that our last slide?
That is our last slide.
Okay. Give me just a second. We've got about a couple of minutes.
Yeah, you're good. You got 4.
Right. How many? 4?
4.
Okay. We're going to do something different with David. We're not going to do the David and Goliath story. We're not going to do David and Bathsheba. Those are the stories you hear all the time. But when you study the life of David, here you have half of 1 Samuel and all of 2 Samuel and the beginning of 1 Kings. When he dies, the beginning of 1 Kings. And he had a tremendous number of chapters in Chronicles. Nobody gets the cover. Moses and David are the two people that get the most coverage in the Old Testament. But there are a lot of people that you don't hear about, like David's mighty men. And we're going to tell you about that. David's sons. Again, you don't hear a lot about them. But there are a lot of characters. If you made a movie of David, the life of David, it would have to really be a good movie, a careful movie. It would have to be, 3 or 4 hours. And you'd have to have some tremendous actors in there. Jonathan is a key actor. Of course, Samuel's a key actor. And so we thought we'd bring in a lot of the ones that you really don't hear much about next week. Or at least, we'll at least take next week. And remember, we do meet in here next week. Yeah. This is the only adult class that does meet next week. So, a word of prayer?
Yes, sir.
Gracious Father, one of the characteristics of a lot of these people is faith. And we realize that even someone like David with the problem with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah, that most of the time David had great faith. And when David called on God and God responded, when Samson called on God after he had done a lot of really dumb things and had these problems, when he called on God at the end, God answered his prayer. And that's why he's listed in the hall of faith, as I call it in Hebrews 11. Help us have the strength to call on God all the time, Father. God wants us to put our trust in him, and let's do that.